Welcome to the Pastured Pig Podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Well, hello everyone. It's Pastured Pig Podcast time again. As Kelly said, I am your host, Troy McClung. Really glad that you all decided to join me again this week. Some updates. You may hear that in the background. That's not static. That's actually rain. And we have had going on our third solid day of rain. And I am so hippie. It is excellent. We had gone, I think it was about 7 weeks when I went back and actually looked at the details there. 7 weeks without any rain of any measurable amount. And so now we're getting it here in about 3 days worth. So we've got, our streams are full again. The pigs are happy. Their wallows are back intact. And it's just happy times. Well, my guest this week is Andrea Sorensen from Rooted Acres Homestead in Wisconsin. And she has an interesting story. She raises American Guinea hogs at a production level. They offer mobile sales, and I won't get into that. I'll let her detail what that's all about. And they have a polyculture there, so they raise more than just pigs. And they're doing a combination of feeding out hay and brewer's grain in the regimen. But we'll dive right into the conversation with Andrea. Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pastured Pig Podcast. Have another great guest lined up tonight that we're going to be interviewing. And with me tonight, I have from Wisconsin on Rooted Acres Homestead, Andrea Sorensen. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, okay, so in Wisconsin, you guys probably have mild seasons all year long, correct?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Right.
If anyone was in the Midwest this past winter, spring, I think they've experienced some fun, that's for sure. So we can talk, we had our first sparrowing in winter, so we can talk about that later, but
wow. Yeah, that
beautiful season.
Yeah, could be a little bit of a challenge up there, I would assume. All right. Well, let's talk about Rooted Acres Homestead. First of all, let's talk about the name. What's the background behind the name Rooted Acres?
You know, naming a farm is always something you kind of toy around with when you're getting started. We bought this property in western Wisconsin about 4 years ago, and we've always had chickens, but we moved into other livestock pretty quickly, and pigs, since they root, that got the name Rooted Acres, and we hope to have pigs in our future. So that's where the name came from.
Very good. Very good. I like that. Okay, so let's give us a 40,000-foot elevation explanation of your homestead, of your farm there. Just kind of an overview of what you've got.
Yep. So we are in western Wisconsin. We are actually about an hour east of the Twin Cities in Minnesota. So we're on that, rivalry border of the Packers versus Vikings. And we live in like a very rolling hills area, not too steep, but we're able to have a lot of pasture land, especially on our property. We have about 22 acres, most of that being hay field, pasture, and then a little bit of wooded. And then, depending on what direction you go in Wisconsin, because of glacier effects, can quickly get very flat or very hilly. We also have, in the Spring Valley area, that's where we actually have our farm. Our climate seems to be pretty up and down, of course, being in the Midwest. So, and our elevation is 1,000 feet elevation. So, pretty average.
Yeah. That sounds like a pretty good setup. So, with the 22 acres, you said a small portion of that wooded. Do you have your pigs on that entire operation? I know you're polyculture, so you probably have some of that shared with some of your other livestock.
Yeah, so we actually, in the winter, we move our pigs to the forest or kind of near our house in the woods. That seems to help protect them from the wind, and it's, closer for chores when we're dealing with snow in the winter. and then freezing water. And then in the spring and summer and fall, we move the pigs out into the pasture where we have separate paddocks to move them through. So that seems to work really well. Always the challenge of moving pigs, but we're able to take advantage of our property that way.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, so the forest kind of becomes, do you keep them kind of in a smaller section there so it kind of becomes a bit of a sacrificial area in the wintertime?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Still sacrificial, definitely.
Yeah.
And it's been so rainy this past few months that we've had like a really high precipitation in our late winter, and now we got 2 inches today. So trying to clear that out, it is pretty muddy, but as soon as it freezes, it stays pretty well. And pigs in the winter, they kind of just have their roots to the food, to the hut, and then they don't really seem to adventure much out past that.
Right, exactly. Well, okay, so what type of pig, what breed are you raising?
We raise American Guinea hogs. We've had a few fluctuations in there, but how we came across the breed, one, we were doing some research. Our first pigs, what's a good starter pig? And we came across American Guinea hog. A smaller breed. They're a small, black, upright-eared pig, very hairy. They don't get as big as their boars and sows, which is appealing as a first-time pig owner and potentially breeder. So then we ended up, purchasing our first 2 barrows. So that was our appeal. There's another factor of we were reading about they're nice, but really great meat quality since they take longer to raise. So that was appealing to us as first-time pig owners.
Yeah. So, and that's interesting. Obviously, there's when you talk to, if you polled all these different pig farmers, pastured pig farmers, there's people that say, okay, those smaller breeds, you're not going to be able to get as much yield on them, and all the negatives there. But and I'm torn between both. But there's a lot of benefit in raising the smaller breeds, as you mentioned. Obviously, handling and just that in general. But what are some of the other benefits you've seen with those smaller breeds?
Well, one is, moving them has been, moving a pig is always quite the feat. If they don't want to go there, they don't want to move. So learning how to move a pig with food as a, don't feed them a little later in the day, and then we've taught them to go up our ramp on our trailer, and then we were able to move them that way. So that was a good appeal. Smaller litters for someone that's starting with breeding is always a good thing to think about. You don't want to end up with 12 pigs right away, piglets at least. Then you have to figure out how to castrate and how you're going to deal with, or promoting or selling your meat. That's a good way to start. We always have loved their personalities. They're extremely tame. Our boar is probably our friendliest pig. He's the first to flop, and we actually ended up with there's a couple different lines of American Guinea hogs. There's bigger ones that have like longer noses, it seems to be, and then more petite, smaller ones that have more short snouts, so they don't root as much. Our sows are more of the petite breed line. They have shorter noses. They're a little bit smaller, but we also had another line in the beginning, and that's our boar. He's much larger than some of the standard for American Guinea hog. I did a tape measure on him last night to just kind of get an estimate of his weight, and he's pushing over 500 pounds, which for an American Guinea hog is kind of large, actually.
Yeah, that's pretty good size. Big.
Yeah, it's pretty big size. So we kind of have a bigger strain, at least in this western Wisconsin area. So, that's one thing to consider is how big the pig is for the American Guinea hog line. Because I've also heard people having really, really small ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There seems to be a lot of variation in that. So, how about finishing time? So, what's your turn time and finish, and what do you consider a market weight for your American Guinea hog?
That's something we've been playing around with. We've had our first, we started with barrows, which I advise for anyone starting with pigs. Just get some barrows, some castrated males or feeder pigs that you're going to trial them out then, and then butcher them. So our first one we slaughtered, and they were 220 pounds at market live weight. And then we brought, so that was after, that was about 13 months of age. And then I brought in a female that we bought her as a breeding deal, but she never produced piglets. I talked to some fellow people that bought some piglets from them, and they also had the same issue, but she was about 2 years old, and her hanging weight, surprisingly, was 280 pounds.
Wow.
It's a Guinea hog.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
That is big. And she had a little bit of a curl to her first, so I suspect maybe somewhere in the line a Mangalitsa got snuck in. That's my guess.
Yeah. Well, okay.
So that's one thing about buying. You buy to look at the condition of the animal and then, decide if that'll be right for your farm. It's always hard to know unless it's a registered line. We do not run a registered line. So we don't know if they're 100% purebred. We're trusting that person for that information, but so far we've been really happy with them.
Excellent. So how are they on pasture? How do they handle the pasture? How much do you have to supplement? How's that working out?
Great. So we move them in the summer. I'll talk about summer first. That's easier. We move them on part of the hayfield that we kind of like establish as the pig area. And there's 3 different areas that we can rotate them through. We just kind of wait till they eat it down and move them to the next. And sometimes we have to go in and brush hog the burdocks and the tall weeds that they just don't quite take down. But on top of their pasture that they knock down, and we haven't had a huge issue with ridding. And maybe if we move them enough, that's part of a solution for folks. But on top of their pasture, we give them some grain from a local producer, just a hog feed ration, and that's very minimal. I give them probably a few scoops a day, like one of those small couple gallon buckets and we have 8 pigs right now, which isn't really a whole lot. And then I give them a little bit of corn, soaked corn, and then we also get brewery grain as part of our feed.
Yeah, oh, that's good. So that is, like you said, you're given a ration. You're not given access to unlimited feed because you want them to stay on the pasture.
No, that's a big thing with this breed specifically. I think if you open stud them, they would become like wood ticks, like unable to walk.
Just little sausage legs sticking out.
Yeah, and that's another thing too about this breed that I didn't mention too much before, but they are a lard type. If you overfeed them, they will become extremely fat and blubbery, which is something most people aren't used to in their pork.
Yeah.
But it's something to consider when buying a lard type breed.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so they handle the pasture pretty well. It sounds like a small amount of supplement, and then you just move them around. So what happens when you transition into the colder months there?
Yeah, that's when we still keep giving them that grain unless we have a lactating sow or a sow I know that's going to go in the farrowing. Then I'll give her a little extra. But for the most part, I keep their grain the same. And brewery grain, that's been a really nice plus. We have a local brewery that I got in contact with. We get about, depending on the week, between 400 or plus pounds of brewery grain of their waste barley. So that's a nice way for us to make this very cost efficient for having hogs and still working a full-time job. So we give them the brewery grain in the winter and in the summer. But in the winter, it's a nice way to make our cost not as much. And then we also give them a lot of hay. So a lot of people talk about American Guinea hogs being a hay-eating breed or, a very good pasture pig. I do believe that you need to give them supplements. I think if I was giving them 100% hay, they would have a hard time. But once they're done eating that grain, I see them munching on the alfalfa in the winter for sure.
Yeah, excellent. So So since you overwinter pigs, what are you doing for shelters? Do you have shelter? I know you said you have them in the woods, and that helps as a windbreak. Do you have portable huts? Do you have a barn? How you accommodating them there?
We have portable huts. We have one that's more of a wooden, bigger, probably 6x10. I use that if we happen to have winter farrowings or it gets into the colder season for that. But we also have some metal, like you see the traditional arched huts that you can find for sale. We've collected a couple of those, and they seem to do really well. We pack them really deep with bedding, and they stack right next to each other in the winter. Last winter, on the weather, if anyone was watching in the Northwest, but we had the Midwest, excuse me, quite the cold snap. We had a polar vortex last winter, so we were dipping down into the negative 50s in our wind chill. And pigs handled it great. It was amazing.
Yeah, that's a little brisk.
Yeah, just a little. They would still just munch in the snow, eat their feed, and drink water. It was amazing. I think if it was that cold, I would skip maybe drinking some water, but we actually had a farrowing in that as well.
Oh, my goodness.
It still was successful.
Wow. All right. So, I apologize for going back, but I missed a question I wanted to ask you. You had mentioned that you get as much as 400 pounds a week of brewer's grain. So if I'm understanding you right, you're not feeding all that out that entire week. So are you storing that? How does that keep, or do you kind of spread that out across some of your other animals?
Brewer's grain is like a great thing to have, but there is definitely pros and cons with it. So, if you get the opportunity, just be aware of how much you're taking in. This is a smaller brewery, so we've taken what they have each week, and it can depend from 1 load a week, which is like those big muck buckets. So we get like 4 in each load, and they're wet, and that's the tricky part. If they were dry, it would be easy. So we take them in, and in the summer, you're dealing with mold and flies. So I try to feed them out pretty quickly in the summer, like a bucket a day, like one of those big muck buckets, but I spread it between our chickens and our meat chickens, our layer chickens, and our pigs, and a boar. And then in the winter, then you have the flip side. It freezes. So there's a couple times where like hauling them in the house to thaw them, or I would get a hot bucket of water to pour over it to kind of chisel it out. So there is some challenges with it, but it is a free feed. So there is that factor there. So you kind of muscle through it.
Yeah, kind of factor that into just balance the free feed to the labor associated with it, and you just factor that into your operation there.
Yeah, and I've heard of people trying to like dry it out, but it's really wet. It's quite wet, so the labor of even trying to dry it would be quite the feat. So we just kind of do what we can, and if a bucket gets too ripe in the summer, we dump it out back and put it on the compost. So that works too.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to your last point before I messed up and backed you up. So with your farrowing, so you farrowed in the wintertime. I assume you farrow at other times as well. How does farrowing go with American Guinea? Do you have to assist? Is there any special setups you have to do there?
No, we have had our first farrowing ever was, I think she had them too early. So we've had 4 farrowings total on our farm so far. First one, I think she had them too early, had no interest in the piglets, and they did pass. The next we had in the last fall, all successful, and the shelter was it was very minimal. She built a nest, a little overhang lean-to, and she did great. It was rainy, piglets were tough, so no assisting, but so easy birthing. I haven't had to do anything with assisting with births so far, luckily, and later litters or farrowing that we've had was the last one was in the middle. It was polar vortex one. That was a little tricky. I didn't think she was bred, and I looked at her and I was like, I think she's going to have piglets, David. That's my significant other. And I was like, we enclosed her into one of the huts, and put a heat lamp in there, covered the hut with blankets to kind of help insulate, and it went really well. We only lost 2 actually out of that farrowing, so we feel very lucky that way.
Yeah.
And then the most recent one was last May. When we have 2 larger sows that we kind of alternate. She had 9 American Guinea hogs, but there's always the crushing issue. It seems like with the large breeds, especially if they're the shorter ones with short little legs. And she did crush quite a few of her piglets. So part of the game.
So what are you seeing? You said in that litter you had 9. What are you seeing litter size on average?
We've seen between 4 and 10. Seems to be our size. I'd like to, 9. I feel like for some that's not very many, but with these it seems like it's better if we have like 8 or 7. But with her it seems like she got kind of downhill, and every time she rocked to get up, we had a little bit of crushing issue. But I think that's something that happens when you farrow on the ground, and
Yeah.
Once they get past,
Yeah, and that's obviously not exclusive to the AGH. I mean, all pigs, and we have that issue with our full size breeds, and that really becomes the the challenge. And if we polled everybody, I know there's some that listen to the podcast that would argue. They're probably screaming right now at their mobile device or whatever, saying farrowing crates, and
I know.
And that opens a whole nother can of worms and a whole nother debate that will be a different podcast. But yeah, it as a producer, and you have those days, you go out to the barn and you see that, then that definitely sticks in the back of your mind. If maybe there's not some not some merit to using one of those.
I know, and even we've talked about that, because you hate to go out there and find them crush. It's like, if they would have made it just a couple more days, they'd be a little bit more quick to get around mom, getting up and down, and if it's cold at all, they go next to her, and we have a heat lamp, but still there's always mom. We've considered a farrowing crate even within like the first couple days. It could make a dramatic difference in survival rate. So it's something we talk about, but we're learning.
Yeah, and I think you just have to figure out what's best for your farm and for your livestock and for your setup. You'd think with especially in the wintertime farrowings that the heat lamp would draw them away from mom enough that you wouldn't have that. But they, like I said, they always got to come back and nurse. They got to feed. So.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, all right. Well, you had mentioned this already before, but let's talk about that a little bit. So, so you have a day job. Does your significant other have a day job as well? And how do you balance all of that with farm life?
Yeah. So I am a full-time teacher at a local high school. I'm an art teacher. And then my significant other, we've been together 9 years, so it's been a while. He works for the city in our town as well. So. It's not. What's nice about being a teacher is, everyone says we have the summers off. So that's always nice in the summer to really devote to the farm, and that's when I can take the time to, grow our garden, focus on. We have other animals too, like sheep too. Focus on lamb, raising meat birds, and focusing on like pigs and farmers market. And in the school year, which now it's September, back into the swing of things, balancing working full time and chores and just doing management of the farm on the weekends. It's nights and weekends, which, if you're starting out, it seems like that's kind of common. So, rushing home, doing chores, and
right.
Using the daylight as much as possible.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Beat the clock with the sunset. I know what that's like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all right. So, So you mentioned something there about farmers markets. So, to bring everybody up to speed, obviously you're not just raising the AGH for your personal consumption. You are actually reselling. So let's go ahead and go down that path. Where are you reselling? How are you reselling? What's that look like for you all?
We do a farmer's market every summer. Well, we have for the last 2. And we do a variety of selling pork, lamb, sourdough bread, and some vegetables. And eggs, of course. So we have to do some research on what do I need to sell this pork and lamb and then potentially eggs at a farmer's market, because it's not bringing a bundle of asparagus. So I went into the Wisconsin Department of Ag and looked into what kind of licensure we needed. And it actually wasn't so bad. Some of the paperwork can kind of be a little bit, wordy and confusing. But if I had any questions, I would call. And we have a mobile retail food establishment license. And all that took was an application. They'd called and asked what, livestock we had. And then they did come out and inspect us. So they looked at our livestock. They inspected our freezer, so it had to have a thermometer that read in and out of the freezer, and then inspected our coolers. So it's not like we had to have a plug-in, clear top freezer at the farmer's market. All we actually needed was coolers with a thermometer. So a nice quality cooler with a thermometer. So it really wasn't too bad. And now that we have the license, we just keep it with us at the farmer's market. The meat has to stay a certain temperature, frozen. And then we just bring it and then sell what we have and then bring it back to our freezer at home once we're done if there's any leftovers.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about farmers market, because I know there's always a lot of debate, especially when it comes to smaller producers, about the effectiveness of farmers market. So when you look at that, I assume is that a Saturday gig? So you're spending every Saturday at the market during the season?
We choose which weeks we want, and we found it being pretty effective. This is only our second summer, so we're pretty new at it. Next summer might be different. Even just choosing, it's nice to be there weekly, because then the customer gets to know you. They expect you there, they want your products, so then they're going to come back looking for you. This past summer, we only did the spring and early summer, but every week. My sister got married, life, in July, so we had to take a break. But by doing every week, that seemed to work pretty well. People expect us there and then got to know our products. And what's also nice is you're selling by the cut instead of by the half of the whole, which I would like to get into because it is easier. But, it's always that thing when people want to buy a half or whole. Not that I'm, I know our product is good, but it's not something that everyone's used to. The cuts tend to be a little bit smaller, a little bit more fat on them. So just that conversation that you can have at the farmer's market. And, if they buy a pack of bacon or they buy some pork chops, that's only, $8-9 that they're spending and trying rather than investing in a whole hog or half a hog. That is a nice thing to have. A lot of the American Guinea hogs or large type breed, it seems like you're kind of educating. This breed takes a long time to raise. They have a lot more red marbled meat. There's a lot more fat. So, how to use the lard, how to use the fat. So there's that as well. So just kind of figuring out what people want and if they like it and if we need to like move a different direction or not. So.
Yeah. Okay. So, one thing that always sticks in my mind too, again, being a marketing guy, it gets my wheels turning when you talk about that setup. So, kind of 2 points to this question. So, at the farmers market, I assume you've got a great opportunity there as people come to see you, as you get repeat customers. Are you collecting data on your customers so you can communicate with them about sales outside the market?
Yeah. So we've had people that, we see commonly, like getting product. A lot of times I'll try and get their number. And then hopefully when we move into halves and wholes, that would be the person I would go after.
Yeah.
And as we keep going, hopefully that becomes more and more. It would be nice to just be able to call someone and take a half a hog rather than piecing it out piece by piece. And that's kind of going down a different rabbit hole here. That's something I could see us doing in the future, making like packages instead of just like piece by piece selling a barbecue package where you have pork chops, ribs, pork steaks, so you're not selling all your bacon in one shot.
Right, exactly.
People are used to certain cuts and they're not used to a pork steak, it seems like. And that's not, even though it's delicious. So that would be a nice way to not have to sell wholes in halves, or the investment that someone has to make, but, get a nice lot of meat, but I'm not selling out on my bacon.
Yeah. And again, being polyculture, I assume you can, as you look into that more, you can even look at doing cross species packets. I know on our farm we'd always call it our breakfast package, and my wife we'd sell the chicken eggs, we'd sell either bacon or sausage, and then we'd also incorporate homemade bread into that, and so that was kind of a neat. Kind of a neat way to package it, kind of have a little bit of nostalgic element to it, and would resonate well with our customers.
Yeah, super smart. We do meat birds every spring for sure. This year we're actually doing a fall batch. We do our lambs, and so if you had a lamb package, sometimes they're kind of small looking in a package, so it'd be nice to bulk them up with some pork and chicken.
Yeah, definitely. Well, also, along the same lines of being polyculture, do you see that at the farmers market, the fact that you have eggs, you have lamb, you have chicken, does that help with your pork sales? I mean, or do you have very diversified customers that are coming exclusively for this particular item?
We are selling in a smaller town farmers market. It's not not teeny tiny, but so I wouldn't say we're getting like as many hits on the pork as I'd like to see. But we do like from scratch sourdough bread, which brings customers in. That's the one thing about selling meat at the farmers market that is hard, unless you have a nice, clear, covered cooler or like freezer. They don't see the product. I can't just let a pork chop sit out on the table.
Right.
We made the mistake already once. Do not have your pork wrapped in paper if you're selling at the farmers market. It's a lot easier to be like, would you like to see this cut? It's wrapped in plastic. And it's a lot easier to, bring to the farmers market and bring home and freeze. It kind of gets a little bit wet. It's not a big deal if it's plastic, but if it's paper, it's a little bit trickier. But that's something we've learned. Do not wrap in paper if you're selling at the market. You can at least show them quickly what it looks like. But that has been kind of a trick. We've leaned toward retail asparagus, which is like a high-selling spring crop, and the sourdough breads that bring people in. They have something to see, and then we can push our meat.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, and I agree with you on the vacuum sealed. I think if you're dealing in cuts at all, whether it's at a farmer's market or whether you're selling them off the farm, people want to see that, especially if they're not that familiar. And as you said, it's a great point. People know bacon, they know sausage, and most of them know pork chops. But when you start talking about a picnic roast, or you talk about ham steaks or some of those things, or ribs, or incorporating some of the other elements, that always get strange looks when we talk about jowl. And people just have to see it to be able to understand it.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And that kind of leads to like, cooking it as well. Dealing with the extra fat. Our bacon does have more fat, so I can, how to drain off your bacon grease and actually use it to cook the potatoes. It's a great way as well to take advantage.
Yeah, and I think it's funny too, as you mentioned, educating people on how to use it, but also tearing down some bad education that we've gone through over the past several decades about how lard will kill you dead. You never use lard because it's what's giving everybody heart attacks, and you find all this information is so not true. So you find it to be a challenge. We have a lot of what I call urban customers that when they say, you being a pig farmer, you're probably 1 foot in the grave already because of the bacon that you eat. It's like, no, actually, my last physical, I'm in pretty good shape. But that whole discussion of pig fat is unhealthy. This animal is not a healthy animal to eat on a regular basis.
Or even just lard. Just having conversations with people about lard. And I wish I could sell rendered lard, but since if you render it, you process it, then you can't sell it. I could sell raw lard, unprocessed, but the vitamin D that's in it is just huge, because what you only find in pasture pigs, because they are out in the sun absorbing all that vitamin D into the fat, rather than pigs that are, housed in barns. So just like the beneficial factors of that, such a, not processed food, using lard in cooking for everything instead of your canola oils.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, let's look here at so you're saying right now you're primarily doing the cuts. You're not getting into wholes and halves a lot, or are you are currently selling some wholes and halves?
The wholes and halves I do are to family and friends right now. So, I'd like to venture out into beyond that. That's kind of the next step, especially as we're getting, as you have more piglets and you keep some back, it seems like you just need to collect some gilts. And right now I have one that looks like she's about ready to pop. So, having a few more piglets on hand, it'd be nice to not have to freeze all those cuts. And that's where halves and wholes are nice. You sell them, they pick them up from the butcher. I don't have to worry about freezing them while we're waiting for farmers market customers. So that would be something I'd like to look into the future.
Yeah,
is selling more wholes and halves.
Yeah, and like you say,
we do.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say that does give you the variety that you need there, and can help. It's nice to be able to move inventory faster, and that balance. And this is a whole other podcast as well, talking about when you sell a whole or half, and you can pass the production cost, the processing costs onto your customer, then you don't have to shoulder that. But when you sell individual cuts, then you have to you have to have that out of pocket for the processor. So that affects cash flow. Again, you can put that into your unit price, but that affects cash flow. If you've butchered 3 or 4 or 5, 10 hogs for cuts, and you have to absorb all that processing up front, then that can affect cash flow.
Oh yeah, and then you have to freeze it and pay the freezer costs. We just bought our 5th freezer last Friday.
Yeah,
so I'm feeling it.
Yeah, we built a walk-in on our farm, and that was probably one of the biggest mistakes I've made. I should have just invested. I should have just invested in more freezers instead of trying to be Mr. Handyman and do my own, because it was what I thought would be very inexpensive turned out to be very expensive.
Walk-in freezer?
Yeah, we built an 8x8 walk-in. Yeah, so yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah, I talk about that. Maybe I should not do that.
Well, it's one of those things. It's nice I got the actual freezing unit for free. It was a barter.
Okay.
And so I thought, wow, I'm really ahead of a lot of costs. But by the time I got the box built, and I tried to do that myself when I should have just looked to buy a prefab unit, the door, all of those type of things. The freezer works great, but it costs me about $150 a month in electricity to operate. So it's it gets a little steep. So I really have to have it full to justify it running.
Yeah, that's more than I thought it would be. Wow. Oof. All right, I'll stick to my chest freezers and upgrades.
Well, it's one of those things too. Again, that unit is a moose of a unit. It could probably do 4 times the size. But again, being free, I'm thinking, it's free. What are the costs going to be? Well, when you drive a Cadillac and you got to repair a Cadillac, then you have to pay Cadillac prices.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That'll be fun to fill, though.
Yeah. Then there's times, when we process 15 to 20 at a time, we do pack it pretty full, so it does come in handy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. There's nothing worse than feeling short on freezer space.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the panic. Picking all this up from the processor, is it going to fit? So let's talk about your processor. What are your processing options up there? Are you USDA? Do you have just state inspection? Do you have good access? Do you have to drive a long way?
We are pretty lucky, being that we're dairyland and we have lots of farmers around. We actually can kind of pick and choose, which I've heard other people talk about. They're driving hours and hours to get to their processor, and that's just one direction. We have multiple processors around us, and we've actually been able to trial some. We've tried one, and then we finally found one that we really seem to enjoy. It's a smaller butcher, USDA inspected. So that's how I'm able to sell parts. And they're a small mom and pop butcher. The owner's always the one to answer the phone, which is great because then I can, you feel like you have a connection if anything goes wrong, which there has been things that have gone wrong. The butcher date got moved last minute all of a sudden, and we were able to deliver the hogs to his house. And he took them in the next morning for us. So that was very generous and not something we always run into.
Yeah, that's a unique situation. Hey, we're dropping these off at your house.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think we feel lucky that we do have that option. And there's ones we haven't even tried that are near us. Because the first one we had, they're a little bit bigger processor, and they have a saltier bacon normally, but because our pigs are fattier, I just think they soaked up the salt, so our bacon was extra salty. So, we're able to try someone new.
Yeah, that is a nice resource, and it's one of those things as you settle on one and you find a partnership there that you can establish, then you can start looking at some of those details and get all that ironed out. Mm-hmm. But that's great. Yeah, I envy that. I'd love to have more than one option. Our options are quite a few hours away.
Yeah, that'd be tough. Other things like last year, I would say was like our year of first. We had our first successful litter, my first time castrating, our first death by another animal, and then our first prolapse rectum. That was fun.
Wow, you have had a potpourri of hog issues there then.
Yeah.
Well, let's
we're not stopping.
Yeah, let's unpack a little bit of that there. So obviously castration. So did you go it alone? Did you have some help? Were you trained first? How did you take that on?
So I would say I went it alone with the training of YouTube. Mm-hmm. Yep. I think I watched your video at one point.
Oh, okay.
To, finally feel confident enough to do it. I mean, I grew up a 4-H'er, I butchered chickens, done venison, so I'm not like the squeamish type, but there is something different about castrating a live animal.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and it's funny how, and again, people that don't understand pigs, and they say, well, can't you just band them? Why you have to get a scalpel? Why do you have to do all this stuff? Just band them like they do everything else. And it's like, okay, well, let's stop and have that conversation. But yeah, there is something intimidating about taking a scalpel to a live animal that's being very audible at that time.
Exactly, yeah. And I've gotten that question multiple times. Like, can't you just band them? I wish that'd be a lot easier.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
No, but not quite that easy. But after our first one, I can't lie, I did crack a beer before I had that first one. That I did.
Was that for you or the pig?
Me.
Yeah, exactly.
I probably wish you could have had some too.
It's right. Yeah, one for you, one for me, and let's both chill out for a bit.
Yeah, and it is different when that animal is not quiet, so you feel extra rushed. But it all ended well. Everything healed great, and then after that, I actually helped a friend. I castrated hers for her, and then I got a piglet in return for doing that, and then I've done others. So, once you get that first one done, it's really not that bad.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's practice makes perfect in that situation. So the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it, and the better you get at it.
A lot.
Okay,
lot faster.
So we have to ask the question. I'm sure everyone's listening, saying, "Okay, you got to tell us about this animal kill." So cross species animal kill. What happened there?
So we have chickens. Most people that have had layers, some predator gets them. Mm-hmm. That's pretty normal. It always is a bummer when you go out there and you find feathers on the ground. But pigs, you think, these are kind of like solid creatures. You try to lift them up even after they're a few months old. You're like, these things are solid. But one evening last winter, is midnight, Saturday night, midnight, I think it was about February, this dog is at our door. We don't have dogs. This big dog was at our door, and I thought nothing of it. Oh, someone's dog got out, gave him some water. It was really cold, and I was like, maybe I should check my animals. And it was a wolfhound. It was quite a big dog, very, very large. It actually took the back out of one of our 3-month-olds. And so we did have to put it down.
Oh my goodness.
That was quite the hard thing to call the owners and kind of deal with that situation.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. That's. I'm sure that was awkward. I'm sure you being upset at the time,
yeah.
and then the awkwardness of saying, "Hey, your dog just killed one of my farm animals. By law, I'm allowed to get compensation for that." But yeah,
And they were very good about paying us for a pig that we would sell at full size. But you just don't expect those things. Things come up when you have livestock. If you have livestock, you have dead stock, and that's part of it.
Yeah, that's a part.
Keep moving forward.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's you gotta. If you haven't had loss yet, count yourself lucky, but it is coming. It's inevitable.
Yeah. And then we kind of had a few rough months there where you're like, the middle of winter, had a couple deaths, and it's like, okay, but then you get through it and kind of feel stronger in the end.
Yeah. Well, again, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It may kill your livestock, but
Exactly.
at least it makes you stronger.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Andrea, let's close with a question that I like to ask everyone. So, in your experience in these past 3 years, what is your favorite thing about raising pigs on pasture?
I think there's like kind of two halves to that, at least for us. I love seeing them out there. There's something about the attitude of a pig on the farm. They almost act kind of like dogs in a way. They come running when they're called. They flop over for belly rubs. We've had a couple get out, and it's the only livestock that we eat. That if you kind of like scold them, they'll run back. So that's always been a fun experience. So, having the personality on the farm has definitely been a bonus. And then, of course, the flip side of that, I've always enjoyed having a meat-producing animal that has a superior quality of meat, and you know where the meat's coming from, what you're feeding it, and, we've really enjoyed that. And getting used to having them on the farm.
Yeah, it is. I love. Yeah, I can definitely concur. I love knowing that we're raising our own meat, that it's good quality stuff. We're in charge of that, and just knowing that I'm feeding my family something that was raised on the farm. It has all of our sweat equity in it. So that's great.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, Andrea, if people want to learn more about your farm, your homestead, where can they find you?
We have our Instagram page is pretty, we post the most on that. So that's at rooted_acres_homestead. We also have a Facebook page, Rooted Acres Homestead, and you can message us on that and find us there.
Okay. Well, I'll share that in our show description so people can find that and check out what she's got going on there. Got some really neat pictures of her setup. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and thank you so much. I pray you have a good season as you move into winter, and you all can stay warm and dry.
Thank you.
All right, well, take care. If you want to know more about Andrea's setup there, it's Rooted Acres Homestead. I'll put some details there in the show notes. You can check that out. I appreciate her coming on the channel. If you happen to be at the Homesteaders of America conference this weekend, that's October the 12th, or October the 11th and the 12th, look for us. We should be there. Our plan is to be there and be there for the 2 days, checking things out. I know there's a little bit of crossover there. If you haven't yet and you wouldn't mind taking the time to give us a review, just go to iTunes or whichever feed service you use. Give us a review, give us a rating. That helps other people find us. I still have a couple interview slots left in the month of October. So if you would like to be on the podcast or know somebody that would, please just go to redtoolhouse.com, click on the Pastured Pig Podcast link, and there's just a simple little form there that you could submit information to me. All right. Well, I hope everyone has a great week and have fun out in the pasture. All right. Take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.